Is Kateryna?
Yes. Hello. It's so good to see everybody here. And I really want to thank the Nizami Ganjavi International Center for providing us this opportunity to see each other. I started missing everyone. I missed you all at the Global Forum. I wish we could have been there. I wish we could have seen each other more. And so I'm so glad for this opportunity. And I think that we all can discuss what we're doing in our individual countries. We can discuss what we've seen in the multilateral area. I think that each of our countries has done something different, and yet I think that there have been very positive examples. I know in our country, in Ukraine, we locked down quite early. I know Azerbaijan locked down quite early, had a very effective course, and also tried to reach out to all of us and to other countries as to what they could do to help with the new COVID-19 fund that they created. So we're very grateful for this opportunity that NGIC is providing us. Today, we're going to be talking about the question, what will the post-COVID-19 world look like, and what is likely to happen to the multilateral world order? We have four very distinguished guests with us today, and these are all former leaders of very important countries that each have very interesting experiences in this new COVID crisis time. Vice President Lanzillotta of Italy, Minister Tzipi Livni of Israel, Prime Minister Otorbaev of Kyrgyzstan, and President Plevneliev of Bulgaria. If I understand correctly, Roshan, we have about 90 minutes.
Yes.
Correct. So I'd suggest that I'm going to give an opening statement, pose a few questions, and then I would like each of you to spend 7 minutes or so, 5-7 minutes giving your views. And then I think we should open it up to questions, discussion, and maybe even coming up with some new ideas. And then, if I understand correctly, also this will be then the transcript of this and the video of this will be available on the NGIC site. Is that correct, Roshan?
Definitely.
Very good.
The previous ones.
Okay. So, you know, over the last few years, we've gotten together.
If I may ask, when someone is speaking, if it's possible to mute it, because when there is a voice, it's immediately appearing different pictures. That's why it will be easy.
Okay. Over the past years, we've gotten together at numerous forums, at the Baku Global Forum, at different NGIC events, at other international conferences, and we've discussed very key global issues. We were talking about an international system that was already showing weaknesses. We saw rising tensions, increasing distrust, an inability to address such very important problems as increasing international aggression by Russia, the Syrian war, climate change, refugee crisis and migrants, inequality. And then suddenly we're hit with a crisis that was very unexpected. And the decisions that our countries will make over the next months will shape the world for years to come. So we have to discuss today, what will this world look like? Will it be one of national isolation or global cooperation? Currently, most of the responses have been unilateral. Is multilateralism failing? Is it failing us all? Is it failing the most vulnerable in the world? Will new elements of a new UN system or a completely new multilateral system emerge from this? Can we find a way to coordinate our measures better, develop a global economic strategy that will bring gains to everyone and decrease inequality? Can we do better to exchange medical research and not be so surprised next time? Can we build trust in our international system, trust in science, in government authorities, in media? The main question is, will we come together or will we be torn apart? And so I would like to ask our first distinguished participant, Vice President Lanzillotta of Italy, to comment.
Thank you. Good morning to everybody. Very nice to meet you. And it's a pleasure and honor to meet you all today, even if only on internet. I think after this long lockdown period, we all feel the need of discussing, sharing views and opinions, imagining our uncertain future. I think the topic we are asked to discuss this morning is crucial for our future. Perhaps we have not all the figures necessary to understand exactly what will happen at international level in the global relationships. This for a number of reasons, I think. The first reason of this is that we don't know when and if the coronavirus pandemic ends, because we are nearly sure to find a remedy to cure the disease efficiently, but we are not sure to find a vaccine. And only vaccine can bring us back to our normal life. Second point, we don't have clear, and this is strictly connected to the pandemic duration, is that we can only very partially forecast how deep and hard the economic crisis will be at global level, beginning with Western countries, both in Europe and in North America. Third point, the more long and dramatic the economic crisis is, the more unstable European Union and every single European country risk to be. Populist parties will increase their political weight, also influencing international relationships, moving from our European strong historical transatlantic alliance to closer relationships with Eastern authoritarian countries, China and Russia, first of all. Italy, as you probably know, has been the first European country to be hit violently by the pandemic. We lived 1 month of a tragic sanitary crisis because we hadn't enough intensive care places in the hospitals, and doctors didn't know anything about this new and aggressive disease. All the country was locked down, all industrial, commercial, cultural activities, schools, universities, locales were closed, and all the activities were stopped except those that could be called is not working. People was incredibly responsible and disciplined. A great solidarity was expressed for elderly and more fragile people. Citizens supported very strongly government's decision. Now a different popular feeling is emerging. The stop of all activities and the awareness that a lot of them, for many months ahead, will not have the same productivity and produce the same revenues, the difficulty for the government to adopt rapidly measures to restore salaries, to give financial liquidity to small and medium entrepreneurs, are now determining a spirit of rebellion against institutions and enlarging dramatically the area of poverty. European Central Bank, as well as European Commission, differently than in the past, adopted immediately a significant number of measures in favor of the most hit countries by pandemic, of the most hit by pandemic countries, like Italy and Spain. But these measures are very slow to turn into something concrete, and it's difficult for suffering people to perceive their impact. So now also European Union is losing its initial appreciation. A further consequence of the pandemic is that nobody knows if and how globalization will work in the future. All scientists say that climate changes will produce other pandemics in the future. Fear, uncertainty can change permanently global trades, tariff flows, distribution of different productions within different countries in the world. In a lot of low added value productions, in fact, which in the past were delocalized by Western countries, now a sort of autarkic sentiment is forming. All these elements can reshape global economy, influence the GDP trend of states, which during the last 20 years had benefited the most from globalization. Such important changes in the economic scenario will inevitably produce changes in the political relationship. To say in which direction global political balancing will evolve, we have to understand better elements I mentioned before that we still cannot know. So we are in a very delicate phase in which, during which all the framework we knew before is changing, and everything is very fragile. So I think it's very, very complex to say the direction we are moving, but we have to be very, very cautious and to monitorize what in the world is happening. I think that next elections in very important countries, beginning from the United States, but also in European countries, are fundamental, because if balancing of forces will change, many things will change in the international relationship, how we knew before. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I would like to now turn to Minister Tzipi Livni, please.
Yes, hello everybody. I will start with speaking a bit about the situation in Israel, and then I'll speak about the global situation. So Israel basically took the right, quite severe steps at the beginning. Lockdown, stopping most of income and out flights. And therefore, as the result, we have quite a small number of those that were affected from the pandemic, and especially those who died from the pandemic. So now this is the beginning of opening the lockdown in phases, taking care mostly on the elders, and these are the days in which they start opening schools and kindergarten after a long period in which grandparents couldn't meet their grandchildren, and hoping for good. And the real question would be whether we will face a second wave of the pandemic, or we are more careful now and we will not see the second wave that the entire world frankly doesn't know whether it's the obvious that this would happen, or maybe we'll see something different, or maybe we'll see it in the winter. So for now, there's a huge question mark. This is about the pandemic, about our health. When it comes to economy, it's a completely different situation. And there's a huge uncertainty about the future. The rate of unemployment from less than 4%, now it's around 25%. The good news is that most of it refers to temporary reasons. People who, at the beginning of the instructions and the regulation, were stopped working, and most of them hopefully will come back to work, but there's going to be a huge group, or a big group, of those that, because of the situation, the economic situation, and the problems that their companies and employers are going to face, it will be quite difficult for them to find again their work, their place in the companies that they left. And therefore, I believe that most of the world now is turning from focusing on the pandemic into the really huge challenge of global economy and national economy. Now, talking in general about how this would impact the world, on one hand, it was clear that the only way to deal with the pandemic was to close borders. And therefore, this is a message of, okay, we need to take care of ourselves. The idea of globalization affected us, harmed us. In a way, those who brought the pandemic to our state, I'm now not talking just about Israel, but this is all over the place. The entire world, everyone is thinking, okay, if we had closed our borders earlier, so nobody could come with carrying this pandemic and creating all these problems. So on one hand, you might say that the understanding now, or the conclusion now, is that we need to be isolated in each state and take care of our own. But this is a wrong conclusion, because it is true that opening borders meant also facing more results of the pandemic. But when we are talking now about the best way forward, how we can heal not only ourselves, but our countries from this pandemic, the meaning is that we will need to work together. And I think that I'm not sure, since we were asked what's going to happen the day after the pandemic, I'm not sure that we can speak in these terms, because today it's not the day after the pandemic, but it's part of a change with a huge question mark. And maybe the day after the pandemic, or the only day that we can refer to as the day after the pandemic, would be after, hopefully, they would find a cure or a vaccine to this pandemic, something which is yet unknown. And in terms of vaccine, it would take few months, at least few months ahead. The problem is that when we are talking on the global community, is that there was no real global response. I mean, we were dealing before about even the lack of possibility to pass a United Nations Security Council resolution, or to do something globally that would give an answer or tools to member states to deal with the problem. And I believe that none of us is safe until all of us are safe. And there's a need for global leadership to deal with the day after, to deal with the pandemic, but also to deal with the day after. For example, even before before the day in which hopefully they will find a vaccine, let's deal today with the issues of how would be the distribution of the vaccine, how different states can get the benefit from this vaccine. Let's deal with the economic crisis that the world is going to face. What is the role of government? And if there is something which is now is clear, is also that globalizations in terms of international companies, it cannot replace the role of governments. I mean, Bill Gates, for example, who really put on the table, frankly, also a few years ago, describing the nature of the threats, what need to be done. But it is clear that Microsoft would not give an answer to the sick person, and this is the responsibility of government, of public health care. So in a way, I think that it is more clear now, it is clearer that there is a role and responsibility of government to take care of their citizens, but yet there's a need for a global leadership working together to face this challenge. Now, since it's a small village, and I don't believe that the day after would be that all the economies would change their nature, and globalization would turn into isolation. And therefore, I think that we will face changes, more people will work from home, maybe we will see different tools to deal with the new situation. but I think that today now is the day to explore what is the role of, and responsibility of the different players, and to set certain ideas and rules and plans that would give an answer to this. And last, and maybe this is in a way a disappointment, because in a way it was clear that we are all facing the same threat, which is the virus, but yet we are not working together in order to find a global response to it. And the response is fragmented. Each state and country is taking different measures in a way. And it's not too late, because we are facing an economic crisis and we need to give an answer to it. And I think that now all the experts that are dealing with remedy and cure and vaccine, this is what they should do. But the leadership, the political leadership should explore, think, and put on the table ideas how the world can meet the economic challenge now, the economic and the social challenge now. Thank you for now.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I would like to turn the floor, please, to Prime Minister Otorbaev of Kyrgyzstan.
Okay, thank you very much. A really great pleasure to be in this group again. And I wish to all of you to stay healthy and optimistic during these difficult times. And just wanted to comment, and my first message is about how, to my view, world will be changed, what will be post-virus world. And divided this point into two parts: what kind of changes we expect in the private lives and the public sphere. Number one, in private lives, we moving very quickly into contactless world, incredibly quickly. So this virus gave enormous impetus into development of this new world. We will soon get rid of a couple of long-lived fetishes of the past, like work week or work day. Things which were introduced just temporarily to save the lives looks like will stay permanently. I found out that amongst the psychologists how quickly human beings can change their habits. It's not easy. And normally people need at least 2 or 3 months to change the most established habits in working, resting, socializing, communicating, etc., etc., etc. But this is exactly the time when humanity is under the lockdown. So many habits in different areas, in business, in private lives, will be changed forever. Of course, there are a lot of discussions what will happen in business and education, entertainment industry. I only wanted to comment about one thing, is revolutionary changes in the public health. We will go very quick to so-called Internet of Bodies, which is Internet of Things connected with the human body through devices which are ingested, implanted, or connected to the body in some ways, and it will change the world very quickly. Because people discovering that their health is absolutely prior to all other points which humanity facing now. Second major shift would be in the area of public lives. What's happening is that indeed all individual countries looks like the islands, which just decoupling from each other and doing things individually. It's not surprisingly, it's absolutely clearly can be explained. But then what will happen next? We have to analyze how different countries and governments reacted to the enormous challenge. And we observe very different characteristics. For example, most of the government, especially the advanced ones, start to use very actively surveillance techniques to fight the pandemic. Few months ago, using these Orwellian methods was unimaginable in many places. But in Asian countries, for instance, in China, they to hunt for them and to lower the quantities of the illnesses showed very impressive results. Now, most of the world using this type of approaches. What happened is that so-called strong governments, like in China, Singapore, Korea, others, demonstrated the most efficient responses. At the same time, so-called weak governments with a lot of civil society participation, they were very slow in reacting to this enormous challenge. Because these methods, everybody agreed, people, that in order to fight for the lives, we need to use all methods. Humanity simply gets scared. Security and sustainability will become in post-COVID world more important than growth or wealth. The state must be possessed with such qualities as defender and the protector of people's lives and living conditions. People will be more willing to obey the state, to give up part of their right to the strong state. Stronger state institution at the expense of individual rights, I think, will be inevitable trend, at least short-term way. World internal reorganization is inevitable. So in that respect, the role of multilateral institutions have to be debated again, and a lot of conclusions should be drawn. Actually, what show us that society actually will go through this war stronger. Normally, societies going from the war situation stronger and more united. In post-virus era, the nations and communities will get closer to each other. We need to find instruments on how to do it the best possible way. People will reconsider how they relate to others, which will result in greater sense of community. So now, in order to get united, we split. Now it's time to debate globally how to do the best possible way. Not only in a way of fighting a concrete pandemic, but on a way how to make our world better, how to get more united, what kind of instruments, practical instruments, we will have to adopt in order to find common language of building up the post-virus world. It will not be easy. We're already seeing it through this war of words everywhere in the media. But the role of debates like that is try to influence others. In that respect, Roshan, if you could prepare kind of outputs of our meeting and later perhaps to plan more meeting of the time that we will brainstorm and actually we'll go to some kind of bullet points of our suggestions and recommendations to international community, how to improve things, how to make things better, will be absolutely great. So now more than ever, world required leadership from influencers and decision makers and great thinkers, which are part of this Nizami Ganjavi International Center. Let's meet more, let's discuss more, let's make more decisions and recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. Those are some very, very interesting insights. Very interesting. May I turn the floor, please, to President Plevneliev of Bulgaria.
Thank you. And Roshan, thank you again for Happy birthday, congratulations. Thank you for keeping us active. And thank you for bringing us together always. You're a good ghost of good things. Greetings from Bulgaria. Actually, I'm very proud to be Bulgarian also, because when it's tough, when it's difficult, then you see who is who. Bulgaria has not a populistic but democratic government that has done a great job, a really great job. People here are very proud of what the government has done. And the country is moving pretty well in this very, very difficult and unpredictable situation. Very good measures taken, very, very timely. The country never totally and completely locked down. You could travel free from one city to another. Shops never been closed, parks never been closed, factories never been closed, and schools were shifting into virtual. But it was a kind of a national mobilization, and we are very proud. The results show that out of 7 million people living in the country, 2,000 infected, we're testing 12,000 people a day. That's pretty much. And 60 people died, which if you compare it to many other countries is almost nothing. So we are very proud up to now, and we continue supporting the government with its activity to continue. And of course, it's obvious that people put health and security above everything. Economy is gonna do also much better than many other people expected. The government has been, Bulgaria has the second lowest government debt in the European Union. It's just the government has been building up reserves for difficult time, has cash, has the trust of the markets. We took a lot of measures, and actually, I think with the very, very dramatic and difficult situation we see in many other countries, we could say that my country is doing pretty well, which is okay. People are free, they can shop what they want, they can go where they want, and we're keeping the number of people that are infected pretty low, which is great. But I wouldn't talk about post-virus world, because the virus is with us, is going to stay with us for a long time. And there were viruses in the past, there will be viruses in the future. But what I really preach and pray, and writing a book about that, Roshan, I will send to you very in a short time the first draft of the book. My book is called Cold Peace, and that's what I'm talking since 2014, that since 2014 we are in a new phase of development from historic perspective. It all started with the blatant violation of international order with the illegal annexation of Crimea, where the rules of international order has been totally blown up, totally and completely. It continues with the rise of populism all over Europe and in the world. Populists are not interested in institutions and rules. They're interested in their own egoistic fights. It all continues with, of course, the COVID-19, and it goes further and further, but that all has its own logic. And the logic is that we are in a transition period from one world order created after the Second World War. We are about to lose to a new world order in a new, bright, multipolar 21st century world with a totally different balance of power that is shifting to Asia, with a totally different, let's say, rules that have to be adopted. Unfortunately, this rule for this new world is not still created. So we are in a transition period. In this transition period, institutions are weakened and are questioned. And it starts with the President of the United States, who questions the World Health Organization, who is dismissing his alliances. And just if you look at the COVID-19 response of the American president, then you understand that we are in a new phase of development. America is not willing to lead. America is isolating itself. The President of the United States, Trump, is the first president ever in the history of the United States that is not making even an attempt to unite the planet in such a difficult moment of history, which was not the case with many other people. American presidents have done that. That was Ebola, there was HIV, there was SARS, and presidents of the United States have been leading in trying to unite the world into finding a solution. And today's American president is just not interested in that. He's stealing the masks of Berlin policemen. He's questioning the World Health Organization, dismissing alliances that have been created by the United States after the Second World War, and not interested at all of international order. So we are again in a transition period from one world created after the Second World War, which we're going to lose, to another world, bright, nice, hopefully peaceful, hopefully green, clean, and more just, but which we are not creating. So my prediction, very simply, is that in this transition period will last at least until 2030, because now we see the rise of populists, and populists in any country in the world were not capable of solving any of the problems on a sustainable way. So we do not expect from populists, name them from Bolsonaro, Erdogan, Trump, Putin, all the others, you do not expect populists to build up rules and institutions. So because of that, it's going to be windy in this transition period, like any of the other transition periods in human history. And actually, it is combined with the new industrial revolution, which is extremely important. In the next 10 years, up to 2030, everything is going to change. The way we travel, the way we work, the way we study, the way we produce, the way we communicate. And as it is all changing, politics is not building up institutions and rules for the new world, but also for the new industrial revolution. Because of that, there will be more instability ahead of us. And we are in a transition period. I call it a cold peace because it is still a peace. None from the regional powers and global powers really want to have a global war. But it is a cold peace because we see the methods from the Cold War. We see propaganda wars, we have confrontation, hybrid wars. Russia is trying to destabilize the European Union. America is isolating. Russia is falling down. And China is not willing and is not capable of leading today. Actually, it's very important to talk about the role of China. China understands very wisely and very clearly that to run 1.4 billion Chinese is pretty tough job. And actually, they're doing a great job about that. But China, look at the situation. Trump, Putin, and others are questioning the institutions and the rules of international order. China is not. So actually, China today is strong enough, if they want, to replace the rules and the institutions of order with such that deem them well, that they're going to do them well. But China is not willing to do that. So China and the European Union stick to the rules, and they really would love to see more institutions and rules in place, so in a kind of a natural alliance. So Russia is falling after 20 years of Putin autocratic regime in a huge corruption, very difficult economic choices. People in Russia are not free. And just to end up with Russia, COVID-19 and the price of petrol is gonna accelerate their drama totally and completely. So Russia's gonna be weak. And last thing about Russia, it's not giving an example to anyone, because Russians are not free, they're not living well, and their autocratic leader should not be an example to all of us. So we are again in a very windy time. We are going into deep waters, the world ship. It's unpredictable, and it's more tough, the situation, and it's not the new Cold War, like Kissinger is talking about that. I totally disagree with him. It's not a new Cold War, but it's called peace. It's new, and it's unpredictable. If you look at the specifics of the Cold War, now it's very different. I can give you a lot of arguments about that. To make the long story short, we are in a transition period from one world order we're losing to another world order which is not still there. And I preach and I pray, I work hard, and I hope that after learning, again, lessons from what happens today and how populists, for example, are running their own countries and bringing not America first, but peace first for the world, which is not happening, of course, I believe that we should work hard and we should preach and pray for a new generation of politicians that will come up again. I would predict this will be around 2030 when the new industrial revolution is going to make the drama total and complete, and politicians will show their total incapability to create the rules and institutions of the new industrial revolution in the world. So up to 2030 is going to be difficult. And then hopefully wise, not strong politicians will come to power to build up trust, because there is no trust today, and build up rules and institutions. And until that time, we should stay focused on our job, educating people, showing the truth about what people like Trump, Bolsonaro, or Boris Johnson, or even Erdogan are doing for their own countries and for the world, and stay focused. Today, the big fight in this transition period, to me, is not between left and right, it's between Democrats and populists. Just divide them on two, and let's support democracy. And just one last thing, Bulgaria should continue working very hard for a strong Europe, but not strong Europe as a state. I'm not a federalist. I do not believe in United States of Europe. I don't think this is going to be accepted by people. It's not good for the countries. But I believe in strong European Union of strong member states. And the European Union in those years ahead of us, unfortunately, the European Commission did not reform, but the next one has to face a very simple choice. Chancellor Merkel is talking about ever closer union. I don't think this is a good recipe. It's not going to happen. But it has to be not ever closer, but it has to be a stronger union, which means in some areas we have to have less union. In other areas, we have to have more. A strong union of strong member states. For example, the Europeans have to come together in foreign policy, in the common market, in defense, in security, fighting terrorism, migration, as a more Europe, a stronger European Union to help national countries to go over those issues. But on the other side, in some other areas, the European Union has to focus less and the others more. So there is reform in front of the European Union. I would hope that in this difficult time, we will pass through without big drama, because as you remember very well, the First World War was a coincidence. Nobody wanted it, nobody planned it, but it happened. And if we look today at the situation, we're not like what was after the Second World War. We are before the First World War. There is no trust between leaders. There are no strong institutions. They do not even understand the importance of the United Nations, the United Nations Security Council. They're not building it up. And even the Russian president, but also the American president, if you look in Syria, are just blocking the work of the United Nations Security Council. We will hope, we will be working very heavy for that in a couple of very windy, difficult years ahead of us, wiser world leaders will come on the table of building up rules and order for a brighter and nicer multipolar world for the 21st century. Thank you.
Thank you. So very intriguing thoughts. Now, I just took a few notes. Excuse me if maybe I didn't catch everything, but a few themes that I think came out of our discussion that I think we can now talk about. First, almost everyone talked about how many unknowns there are. Unknowns when this will end, when there will be a vaccine, will there be another wave? And that makes planning, that makes policy making very difficult. None of us is safe until all of us is safe. So the importance of a global outreach, the need to plan for today, plan today for tomorrow, and the importance of governments and global leadership, the permanent changes to private and public lives that we're going to see and the new technologies that will arise, The different and maybe increased role of the state for security and sustainability, and the possibility that we'll prefer stronger states at the expense of individual rights. The very difficult transition we are going through to a new world order as a result of the COVID crisis, and also as a result of the Industrial Revolution, and as the president said, the new cold peace that we're seeing in the world today, a different world order. The role of China, that it could actually create a world order if it wished. Just an interest, I listened to an interesting podcast this morning from my university where some economists talked, and there was an Italian economist who said that, well, if Europe does not come through for Italy today, we will be very happy to turn to greater cooperation with China instead. And so that I found that interesting. If I could open it up so that you could comment on each other's talks.
Close the 5-star.
Yeah, and also answer, in a world that's categorized by less US leadership and a divided Europe, how can we come up with a global plan of action? And a global plan that will address the economic issues we face now, which is real problems, I think, that will come in our supply chains and greater uncertainty when it comes to trade and investment and the international labor market, and how we will address the needs of the populations in our world, which cannot transition as easily. As I was reading that only 22% of Mexicans can work from home. In our country, only 70% of the people have internet. And so there are technological barriers to some of the transitions that we need to accomplish. So I'd like to ask for your comments, and if possible, if we could go to Linda Lanzillotta first, please.
Thank you, but I appreciate a lot the optimism of our Bulgarian president. I agree on the point that we are in a transition period, and that by 2040 the world will be very different. I think that this crisis gave a little taste of the future world, how we can live having relations with different relations with people, a different way of education, of organizing education, the diffusion of the online commerce, for example, is changing deeply the distribution network. And I think that there will be an acceleration after the crisis, because everyone, even elderly people, discover that it's possible to organize his life differently. And this will be an accelerator for a wider change. But it's also true that, like often happens, this crisis will produce a different distribution of richness. Someone is gaining a lot from the price, and many other are getting poorer and poorer. So we should have a new means to distribute richness, but it's not enough what we were used to do with the public budget. You saw with taxation. Is taxation the right way for distributing richness within in each country and within the countries? Because this is can be very important in the future of stability. I think that the fracture, the social fracture in the countries, in every single country and within different countries in the world is being going to be wider and wider. And I see all the risk of this situation. You know, the poverty put in discussion, it's happened in Italy, it's happening in Italy during the crisis, the democracy, how democracy works. It's too slow, the procedures, how democracy decide, solve problems. So what was saying before about the ambassador, the stronger governments or the more authoritarian government, more populist government seem to be more efficient, and they are very attractive for people. When you mentioned before some Italian economist, I imagine he is very close to five-star moment, and many are saying that the authoritarian regime like China worked very, very better during the crisis than the democracies, which were slower, which had to respect the liberty of people. And these regimes in this phase, in this transition period, is very attractive. We don't know today, and this is a very important discussion in our countries, and I imagine you know well, how democracy can work in the future. In the future, before the crisis, we said we were saying that how democracy works with internet, with fake news, with capacity of shaping public opinion by internet, and now we have something more to deal with. And so how democracy can work when decisions are so rapid, but also so complex. The government, the managing of complexity emerging more and more during this crisis. And so I see that the transition period will be a very troubled period, because there are a lot of points of approach that we don't see clearly, just because all this is changing. What is true, and I agree very much, is that it's changing the scale of values. Not only growth, but quality of life, but safety, but health, and this can change also the priority of policymakers, because there is much more sensitive than before values which we were losing, which were human values. And I think that in my country, but I talked with other friends in Europe, we are discovering in the lockdown also the value of more of human relationship, of staying at home, of having a slower life. I think that all this will influence the future, because we are gaining again something we were losing totally in, and perhaps we during the last 15 years we had lost completely. So for my country, I see that our government is very, very focused on the issue of remain in a European Union very united, but it's a very, very challenging task because the individualism and the nationalism in many European countries is very strong. And the other point I would reflect about is that there is also a changing leadership. I think that perhaps the end of the political career of Mrs. Merkel, who, however, had a very, very huge role in keeping Europe united, risk to make prevail in Germany the wing, the more tough wing, the more anti-European wing, not because they are against the Europe, but because they don't want that Germany pay for solidarity with other countries. It was the problem that we lived where create the new currency, euro, and during all the financial crisis, there was always this polarization. So the change of a leadership, of a generation, which, however, lived the past, the end of the war, the deep reason why European Union was born. I think that risk to lose the sense of root of Europe and make it weaker. What we have to do is to invent a new way of make economy working. I think that, however, globalization will slow because there are some barriers which pandemic built inside every single individual. For example, in Italy and in all the Mediterranean countries of Europe, tourism is a component, a fundamental component of GDP. And tourism, I think, will be very, very hit by the crisis. It's very different to invent a different way to make tourism without moving, without flying, and many people, I think that will not go again on a plane for many years ahead. It's not necessary. So it's very challenging for us, and this I share with other discussants to have ideas about how to reshape our way of producing, of living, of amusing, of life cities. We know, the problem in the metropolitan area is very, very huge because we have a problem of mobility in the metropolitan area, which is very difficult. In the underground and in the autobus network, people has to maintain the social distance, we now say, and it's impossible to manage the transport system in this way. So how we have to reorganize metropolitan area? This is a problem we are living in Rome and Milan, and I imagine in all the other great metropolitan areas. So we have to invent a new way of living, and I hope we can discussing, we can give a contribution to policymakers which are living now a very, very difficult and challenging task.
Thank you. And now, Minister Livni, do you believe that it's possible to come up with a new global plan of action now?
Okay, thank you. I would like to refer also to some of the most interesting things that we heard from my colleagues before. And I think that it's clear that since, well, we are having this Zoom meeting because of COVID-19, and we are all focused on the pandemic, but some of the trends that are going to affect the future of the world were here before the pandemic. And I'm not sure that the pandemic will change its some of the trends. So in a way, one of the most important questions maybe, as President Plevneliev presented, also refers to the transatlantic alliance and the role of the President of the United States in leading what we used to call the free world that was united. So in the past, we had a free world led by the United States, and then we had more and more players that want to take positions in this world. But it looked like when we were looking at China that in the end, China will adapt our set of values and will be part of this global world as a superpower maybe. Now things are changing, because basically what the United States, the message coming from the United States is, hey guys, you need to choose whether you want to be part of our camp or to be with China. And this, and I believe especially President Trump basically is asking every state to take a side in every economic move, connection to, and this is something that would make it more and more problematic in the future if this would continue. So one of the questions, which is also part of the unknown, is what would happen in November in the United States. Now, I wish I had these optimistic views about the trends that we are in a transition period going to a better place. I'm not sure. I mean, I'm more optimistic that I don't think that this pandemic is going to stay with us for the rest of our lives. I think that in few months, when it comes to the health situation, we'll have the answer, and then we need to deal with the economic situation. Now, the real question that we need to ask ourselves is, how do we break this vicious circle? Because it is clear that when we have fear, whether it's coming from the outside or just a few years ago it was from immigration and now from the virus, and you have these populistic leaders trying to have more and more power in order to change the nature of democracy. And especially now, as my colleagues were related to, people were willing to give up their privacy in order to stay alive. And it is clear that this would be abused by those leaders that who wants to get more and more power. So the real question is, how do we break this vicious circle? Because apparently it looks like it works. It looks like those populistic leaders are getting more and more support. And in a way, we need to have a discussion what we have to offer, because I believe that all of us in the forum and sitting here, we believe basically in the same set of values. We don't need to discuss it. It's clear to us. We know who we are, we know what we believe in, and we know what is the education that we were raised upon. And I think that we need to understand that there is a young generation that is living in a way in a different dimension. The red lines that exist in the past, they don't exist anymore. And when red lines are being crossed, the real question, who's going to bring it back? And it is also clear during this pandemic, as was already said before by me and by others, that the United Nations couldn't or did not succeed until now. I'm not talking to organizations like the World Health Organization, but I'm talking about the organization itself, didn't represent any alternative of leadership to the situation, because it depends on member states, and basically on the United States. And therefore, just to end this part, I think that our responsibility is to think not just how we have a better assessment of the situation, but what we have to offer to young generation during this difficult time, and in an understanding that since this is not the bloom of globalization anymore, because we are facing economic and social problems, there is no vacuum in the world. And if we would not put those of us believing in this set of values, if we would not put something that young people can relate to and feel that they are willing to fight for it, somebody's, not only one, other ideas would be there. And I'm not sure that these ideas would represent what we believe in. And therefore, I think that we cannot just sit on the balcony waiting for this to pass until we would reach the day after, or the second, or the next phase of the world. But we need to think how can we be influential. And just before ending, I have one question to my friends. What do they think about the EU this day, facing all these new economic and social problems? Is it strong enough to pass this period of time, showing solidarity to states that would be in a deeper or in more problematic situation? And the other question is whether the transatlantic alliance was harmed or is broken in a manner that cannot be amended, or this is something that did not pass, or is it clear now, as it was after the Second World War, what is the benefit for all the different parties in this alliance, so they will be willing to reinvest in this alliance or not?
Thank you. Prime Minister Otorbaev, please.
Okay, I want to just touch one subject which you raised about a process of de-globalization, which happening and tremendously accelerated by the current pandemic crisis. World international trade volume in in 2018 was about $20 trillion, which is 10 times more than in 1980. So the world is really international in terms of value chain and corporation investing over the borders without any hesitations. So what will happen this year? That World Trade Organization forecasting that it will be between 15 to 30% fall in international trade. This is absolutely incredible failure of value chains. Up to now, about 50% of international trade controlled by big international corporations. But what's happening now that the governments, in the sake of fighting for the health of people, blocking export-import operations, and companies get very scared what they will do in the future. Should they develop in a further value chains through the borders, or they must be focused, just concentrated in one place? Blocking. United States, for instance, blocked the shipment of 3M face masks produced in its Singapore factory just exclusively to export to US. In a Philips Electronics factory in US producing this special apparatus for breathing, they also blocking its export to other countries. So more and more cases of this time we are observing around the world. So inwards tendency of production and cutting of value chains through the borders is very, very dangerous. So one of the points which we have to talk, what will we do in the future in terms of globalization, returning to tendency of globalization, when efficiency and creating jobs in more difficult places in the world is extremely important for more harmonized distribution of production and distribution. So this is something which we must discuss very urgently, because, okay, pandemic, people fighting with it, but what will happen next with the poverty? What will happen with just people that get hungry in many places in the world? Yes, there are good steps by World Bank, IMF, by relieving some debt payment to the poor countries. Should this tendency will go further for helping the most needy ones to survive in this difficult situation? So another point for further debate would be how to get world economy back to normal global development. This is one. The second, more nice theme for discuss, I would say, even for us now, is that it looks like that it's going on to be quite heavy new Cold War between China and United States. Every day we're seeing that it's more and more harsh messages, people exchanging with each other. Yes, of course, we have to wait for November before real things would happen in a couple of years to come. But my question to you is that indeed, can European Union be facilitator, efficient facilitator to not stop only, but some kind of try to not bring this new Cold War rhetoric and actions to be at least under some kind of control. Otherwise, this whole world will be suffering out of this new Cold War. So something which we have to think about the future.
Very good points. And now President Plevneliev.
Yes, thank you. So not a Cold War between the United States and China, and not a new Cold War, because the situation we are today is not a replica of everything that happened in the past. It's a cold peace. It's going to stay as a cold peace for the next years. China is going to look at the United States not as an enemy. And the United States is not going to look at China as an enemy, but as an opponent. They will play against each other, but it's not going to be a war. Because of that, it's peace, but it's a cold peace. Listen, I agree with Max Weber. I mean, one of his last lectures in Munich, like 100 years ago, he was insisting to students and again saying, people don't learn from history. No, they do not learn from history. And I agree, we're not learning from history. And that's our biggest problem. And we're gonna learn the hard way again that we're not learning from history. Just look at the United States. I mean, if you look at the debate today in the Congress, even in some areas, the Democrats are even more aggressive against China than even the Republicans. And in order to be reelected, Trump is trying to overplay the Democrats on China. But the other countries are taking a totally different approach. Even the closest ally of the United States, which is the UK, on the Huawei case, took a totally different approach. And the Germans too, and the Europeans too. So we continue to cooperate with Huawei, as the United States have arrested the financial director of Huawei with not clear ideas why they've done this. So again, what is the meaningful role for Trump to play? He's not building up rules. He's not building up institutions. He's not building up alliances. He's not representing even the American dream, because the American dream is not to be a billionaire and have a model as a wife. The American dream is about freedom. It's about starting from scratch and creating something. That is why, again, but I see a meaningful role for Trump. I'm gonna surprise you. And that is, again, even what Trump does, and he does it extremely efficiently, is he's destroying the existing world order. Even he comes from the real estate industry, for the building up industry. You would expect he's building up. No, he is destroying. And it makes sense. Before building up the new world order, you need somebody to destroy the old world order. And that's what he is doing. And he's doing it greatly. So it makes sense. Whatever the name of the American president is going to be elected in November, if Trump is reelected, we don't care. We know who is he. But even if there is another name of an American president, it's not going to change much, because of the situation that America today is, American society is deeply divided. America is very weak internally. America has a very bad infrastructure. Actually, America is, I understand the point of putting America first, even I don't agree with that. So actually, America is gonna do more internal stuff, is gonna isolate more. And the first thing the new elected American president after Trump has to do is to start reconciling the badly damaged and divided American society, which is so bad, but it's true. And the point here is, again, more instability ahead of us. There will be more pain, more economic pain, more and more people are going to lose their jobs, not just because of the virus, but also because of the new industrial revolution. Global supply chains are totally shifting. It is all changing. The German car manufacturers in a deep drama, but they understood that that's the point now to turn to electric, hydrogen. That's the same with energy production. And we're going to see a huge shift to totally new supply chains and totally new industries that are coming. So the cards are mixed. And if you have wise countries with wise leaders, they could position themselves well in a new, in the new situation. Speaking about Italy, I don't think that China could be alternative to Italy at all. Just look at Africa. What China has done with Africa is that if you ask today a lot of African leaders, they wouldn't point on their largely, let's say, expected cooperation with China to be a huge success story. So again, we're moving also to a situation of instability instability, a fragmentation, more world powers, more global powers, put them Russia weak with very bad economy, but still a global power, put China, put United States, hopefully put Europe as someone who will continue to play a very indispensable global role in the future. And I believe into this. And there's a lot of regional powers. And what happens in this transition period, because it is a transition period, is that all those global powers and regional powers are putting their ambitions on the table of how to divide the cake in a new way. Talking about Europe, I think that the price of living in Europe is very high, and I do not expect another exit. If you look at, again, populism is a lesson not learned from history. Just look at Boris Johnson. The British populists have been neglecting the facts. A lot of experts have been saying what's going to happen with the British economy if they are leaving the European Union, but they just manipulated the facts, neglected the facts. And now we will see a hard Brexit. It's just ahead of us. It's, again, the United Kingdom is isolating itself in its own island, its small island. So again, no sign of positivism, but that's what populism are doing. They are closing behind their nationalist, egoistic agenda, and always looking for convenient opponents. And here I come again to Italy. When a bridge was falling into Italy, which was a big drama, Italian populists have been pointing at Brussels and saying Brussels is responsible. Now you tell me, what has Brussels to do with the fallen bridge in Italy? And especially, actually, the European Commission was even paying partially for that bridge. And here my point is that the nation state plays a very important role. Italy pays a very high price for populists because Berlusconi was the father of all European populists. And then you have all the others from Beppe Grillo to the others. Those people are very good at playing with people's fears and hopes. And we're going to see more populism in the world just because there will be more drama, more lost jobs, more lost lives. And populists know how to play with people's fears and hopes, but they don't know how to run a country. Because to run a country is a very serious business for serious people. And that's what we need. So the point here again is that I don't think somebody else will leave the European Union, but the European Union has its own divisions, cannot lead globally, but can play a dispensable role for the more instability to come. And as Max Weber is totally right, that we're not learning from history, we will learn the hard lesson again in 10 years' time, I believe, where it is very tough, very unstable, much more migrants, much more drama, much more one against each other. We will learn the hard lesson, and before hopefully not coming to another global war, we will start building up with the wiser politicians, rules and international for a multicolor, multi-power, difficult to balance a new world to come. And today we're just falling. Thank you.
Can I also comment, Ms. Kateryna?
Of course.
I just wanted like to say, commenting to Ms. Tzipi Livni, but she just gave some questions based on previous discussions which we've been having about European Union. Majority, no one thinks that European Union is showing a solidarity because there is a big crisis that's going to come. Who is going to leave the European Union after Merkel? And is it going to be a populist leader? And also another example, when Europe was sending Spain masks for protection, and France was blocking it in its border and being using it for itself. And Italy's situation, it started playing game inside of the European Union. And Europe, in a short time of history, faced so many crises: refugee crisis, terrorism, and climate change. It's just like, shock after shock. And that's why it's going to be very difficult for them. And everyone thinks definitely that America, President Trump is pulling everyone to take a side, China or America. But the interesting thing is that when giving apart, who will be with China, I mean, America is not giving anything. America is just only like political will. But China is so far still the only country which been started like providing a huge support. And also, like, you know, the most important thing was after the Second World War, everyone's problem, not a problem, concern was that the United Nations fell apart. I mean, it's almost like, you know, the Second World War when it started, Security Council couldn't be able to have two meetings. And there is no Security Council's call for ceasefire. I mean, United Secretary General has no power almost like to lead anything, because definitely some countries going to say weather, and the economy is going to hit all the countries, especially most of the countries which is dependent from tourism. Who is going to support them, and how economical feedback it's going to be? Because, you know, you can't print every day, like, you know, United States of America, lots of money, because sooner or later it's going to create an inflation. So far, this. Ms. Kateryna?
Yes, well, Rosen, I can't wait to read your book. You brought up some really, really fascinating points today. And I see that it's about time to wind up, unless somebody strongly wants to make a comment. Maybe Mrs. Lanzillotta, you'd like to make a comment?
Yes, something about Italy, because I agree on the point that the populace in Italia was born with Mr. Berlusconi, but I would correct a little bit the image you have perhaps of Italy, because anyway, the most important party, populist party, which is the Lega, and Mr. Salvini, is losing a lot of consensus according to the polls. Because I am convinced that when you have to face concrete problems, populists are not able to solve them, and the trust into capacity of populism of managing the country is much more weak than in the past. And European feeling in our public opinion is still very strong, but we are fighting in this transition period, which is very, very important, to show that European Union is able to give answers to people's problems. And however, I think that in this short period, I mentioned at the beginning of my intervention, Europe made a lot. The Sure Fund for salaries, the European Central Bank, which is buying bonds to maintain the spread at a sustainable level. The recovery fund, the fund for financing health expenditures. So I think that people is seeing that Europe is has mobilized itself to give support to the countries which are hit by the pandemic. So I wouldn't give a homogeneous picture of my country, because is not all public opinion is not populist, and we are now a very important player in European Union for having a positive result, so that after the crisis, European Union can be stronger in its capacity of decision and of deciding in favor of specific countries which are specific problems. And I think that pandemic is the best base to experience such an approach, because pandemic hit a lot of countries, and economic crisis we have to face together. Going ahead with the Green Deal strategy, because we have to manage the two lines before the transition to the sustainability revolution and the recovery against the crisis. I think that the two together have to be the guidelines of our action and for recovery plan after the crisis.
Well, thank you all very, very much. We've run out of our time. I really want to thank Rosen and the NGIC for an opportunity to bring together representatives from Western Europe, Eastern Europe, former Soviet Union, Caucasus, and Central Asia, to talk about these very important issues. I listened to the previous panels, which were also fascinating, and I have to say that I personally welcome the opportunity to be at home and yet get so much intellectual stimulation, thoughts. And I'd really like to see these panels continue, Rosen, and maybe we could come to the point where we could actually indeed come together and come up with some types of policy recommendations for our countries and for the world order. So I want to thank you all very much, and I look forward to seeing everybody again in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Very good. Thank you, Kateryna. Kateryna, thank you very much.
So good to see you.
You are
Yeah.
welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.